When a WWE star's career starts to stutter and they find themselves on the bubble, they know they must do something to improve their standing or else begin planning for their future endeavors. One way to regain momentum is by ditching a gimmick that isn't quite working as well as before, or simply never worked in the first place, in favor of something new. It's a trick that's revived plenty of careers before, but the sad truth is, there is no magic formula, and a gimmick change may provide less a true lifeline and more a stay of execution. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 gimmick changes that fail to save WWE careers. Join us. Number 10, Jesse to Slam Master Jay. Jesse and Festus were a fun, family-friendly tag team that were well suited to the PG era. It gave developmental prospects Ray Gordy and Luke Gallows something to do, and they found their niche as a house show opening act, but they were broken up after Festus was drafted to Raw while Jesse remained on SmackDown. Gallows would soon find success as a member of the Straight Edge Society, but Jesse would rebrand with less favorable results. Reviving his old Ray Geezy gimmick from his Deep South wrestling days and changing his name to Slam Master Jay, Gordy portrayed a white rapper complete with cornrows, do-rag, and baggy pants. The character wasn't a regular presence on television, wrestling only a handful of matches, with a few of those coming on the lowly superstars. Though he got a victory over the luckless Charlie Haas, the Slam Master did the honors for Dolph Ziggler, Kane, and the Hart Dynasty while teaming with Jimmy Wang Yang. His last appearance came in the WrestleMania 26 pre-show Battle Royal, which he didn't win in case you were wondering, his release not surprisingly coming just a few weeks later. Number 9, Demolition Smash to Repo Man. Who remembers back when tag teams actually meant something and could be a genuine main event act in WWE? Barry Darsow, who achieved a tremendous amount of success as Demolition member Smash, certainly does. Smash, alongside Axe and to a much lesser extent Crush, were a top act in the day, headlining major events and enjoying 3 tag team title reigns, including a record-setting 478-day one. As the late 80s turned into the early 90s, Demolition lost a little of their luster, and with Axe on the way out of the company, Darsow needed a new gimmick in order to have a proper run as a singles wrestler. The character he turned into was Repo Man, his own creation inspired by his previous job in the repossessing business. A slice of true wackiness that was certainly in keeping with the product of the time, Repo Man was a sneaky heel that looked like he came right out of a comic book. Aside from a program with the British Bulldog, Repo Man failed to rise above a certain level and sort of just petered out, a planned babyface run failing to materialize before Darsow moved on. Number 8, Mideon to Naked Mideon. Plenty of things, like sitting around your house and watching television while eating a big bowl of spaghetti, are better when they're done naked. Take my word for it. One thing I can categorically state is not better when done naked is Dennis Knight appearing on WWE TV. Knight had been a hog farmer, a gun for hire, and a disciple of the Ministry of Darkness, but when his association with the Undertaker's satanic group ended, he floundered. Apparently done because the man behind the gimmick used to routinely hang out in the locker room in his birthday suit, Naked Mideon emerged in the summer of 2000 by coming out and streaking during matches. The whole fanny pack, thong and boots look was a bold choice, and while the gag obviously got old very fast, and nobody in their right mind could have conceivably enjoyed the character, Naked Mideon surprisingly got a pay-per-view title match out of the whole escapade, losing to European champion William Regal at No Mercy. From there, Naked Mideon would pretty much be a ghastly, boner-killing memory. Number 7, Funaki to Kung Fu Naki. Funaki was never a main event player or anything close to it during his time in WWE, but he continuously survived rounds of cuts and knew his role, which was typically to enhance other, bigger stars. After being employed for a decade, the former Cruiserweight champion went from regular Funaki to Kung Fu Naki when R-Truth asked him his full name in a backstage segment. It was first name Kung, middle name Fu, last name Naki. And so after this revelation, the Japanese wrestler began wearing a gi and imperial-style headband and made his entrance to a copyright-friendly Carl Douglas knockoff. Rejigging his offense to comprise entirely of martial arts moves, including the devastating crane kick finisher, Kung Fu Naki got an initial victory over the doghouse-residing MVP, but was then beaten in quick fashion by both Edge and Umaga. After that, it was back to house show and battle royal, royal duty, Funaki's WWE tenure finally coming to an end after he participated in the WrestleMania 26 Dark Match Battle Royal. Number 6. Jim Neidhart to Who. As a favor to Stu Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart got umpteen chances in WWE and was frequently brought back, usually to tag up with family members Brett or Owen. For some reason, when the former tag team champion was recalled from the Indies in 1996, he returned not as his usual self, but as Who. Who was who, you ask? Well, Who was literally a walking one-note joke, as the entire thing was designed for commentators Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler to do an Abbott and Costello Who's On First style routine. Possibly in an attempt to save the Anvil's blushes, Who wore a bright yellow mask and trunks. Wait, who wore a bright yellow mask? Exactly, who did? That's what I'm asking you. Who wore it? Hey, that was actually kind of fun. I can see why Vince almost ruined a man's career to do that. Anyway, Big Jim only wrestled 5 televised matches as Who, all of them losses, before someone realised the joke stopped being funny after the first 15 seconds and Neidhart once again left the company. Number 5. Shawn Stasiak to Planet Stasiak. Shawn Stasiak was booted out of WWE the first time after it was discovered that he had been secretly recording his colleagues' conversations. Turns out the secretive society of sports entertainers didn't take too kindly to the backstage breach, and there was clearly some residual resentment when the son of former WWE champion Stan Stasiak returned for the invasion over a year later. Portrayed as an absolute fool who inevitably got humiliated while trying to perform sneak attacks on the likes of The Rock, Stasiak was a bit part player for the Alliance. He then disappeared from television for a while and resurfaced following the initial WWE draft as a member of the Raw roster. Shawn now claimed to be from Planet Stasiak, talking to himself in rhymes and claiming to hear voices in his head. It got Stasiak back on television, but even though his gimmick was different and more over the top, his fortunes remained the same. Seeing the writing on the wall, the second-generation star asked for an early release and all but left the business to become a chiropractor. Number 4. Blackjack Wyndham to the Stalker. Many WWE stars have put their foot in it after discussing their hobbies or hidden talent with Vince McMahon. It's how Darren Drozdov became Puke and how Scott Hall almost became a real-life G.I. Joe before he was able to convince the boss that Razor Ramon was where the money was. Barry Windham, who had previously wrestled for WWE under his real name and as the Widowmaker in the 1980s, wasn't as lucky when he returned to the company in 1996. After the genetic jackhammer became aware of Wyndham's penchant for hunting, fishing, and all things outdoorsy, he made the former NWA heavyweight champion the Stalker. It was as crap as it looked, and I'm sure you'll all agree it looked really crap. Big Baz was only the Stalker for a few months, during which time McMahon himself on commentary derided the gimmick and he was openly referred to as Barry Windham by other wrestlers. Any hope of reviving his WWE career was soon dashed, however, when he was repackaged in a mid-card tag team with Bradshaw. The new Blackjacks became old news real fast, and Windham soon left once again for WCW. Number 3. Friar Ferguson to Bastian Booger. Prior to WWE, Mike Shaw was actually a pretty damn good worker and had enjoyed a decent career in territories like Stampede Wrestling, whereas McCann Singh he had a great series of matches with Owen Hart, as well as a notable run as Norman the Lunatic in WCW. The gimmicks the unfortunate Shaw was saddled with upon arriving in WWE made Norman look like Stone Cold Bloody Steve Austin, as he suffered a 1-2 punch of suck that sadly overshadowed everything he'd done before. The first was Friar Ferguson, a mad monk that wrestled a grand total of 1 match on Raw before the Catholic Church of New York got upset and it was immediately dropped. And just how do you follow up one of the lamest gimmicks in history? Why, with something even worse, of course! The gluttonous and slovenly Bastian Booger was allegedly a punishment for Shaw's inability to keep his weight down, but really anyone who had to watch Booger shuffle around in that electrical tape S&M outfit were the ones suffering. Booger's stomach-turning run lasted about a year before he was captured, hogtied, and roasted on the roof of Titan Towers. Or he left for the Indies or something. I don't know. It was one of the two. Number 2, Rob Conway to the Con Man. Rob Conway spent what must have felt like an age toiling in WWE developmental before finally getting a shot on the main roster as the French sympathizer member of La Resistance. Once that had run its course, the former tag team champion said au revoir to the Fifth Republic and tried to reinvent himself as the Con Man. And don't get me wrong, the best way to reinvent oneself is to grow a cool handlebar moustache and get new Randy Newman-inspired entrance music. music. I mean, just look at him. Ain't he a sight to see? The whole damn world wants to look like him, but they don't, so just look at him. Just look at him in his sunglasses and biker cap, rock hard pecs, tiny shorts. World Championship material, wouldn't you agree? Sadly for the con man, who liked to do things the con way, get it? He found himself stuck on heat most of the time, the most memorable thing he was involved in being a feud with the Legends crew. Not exactly having a legend killer Randy Orton effect on his career, Rob instead became a glorified jobber prior to being unceremoniously released. Number 1, Mordecai to Kevin Thorn. Kevin Fertig arrived in WWE with a lot of hype, including the whole vignette treatment as Mordecai. Sort of the anti-Undertaker, Mordecai was obsessed with purity and dressed in all white. The end goal was for the Pale Rider to meet the Dead Man in a major match or series of matches, but Mordecai quickly disappeared from our screens. Fertig would ultimately get released about a year later, only to be brought back for the rebooted ECW as the vampiric Kevin Thorn. Coupled up with the sultry Ariel, Thorn got to dismantle some lower card guys and then joined up with the New Breed in their dispute with the ECW originals. Once Ariel was released and the New Breed split up, however, WWE lost all interest in Thorn, even if they did try to apply a fresh coat of paint by giving him a new look. A post-ECW trip to developmental and some lingering injury woes spelled the end of his time in the E. Nowadays, he just prowls the streets of Stamford, Connecticut at night looking for fresh victims to drain innocent blood, or he's a realtor or something. I don't know, it's one of the two.